Have you ever wondered what happens when a fairy tale shatters in front of hundreds of people? We're not talking about a simple stumble at the altar. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar wedding, a groom with a devastating secret, and a bride whose perfect day becomes a public nightmare. This is the story of Chloe Astor and Julian Devereux, a couple whose names were synonymous with high society perfection. But behind the custom couture and champagne fountains lay a betrayal so shocking it would bring an empire to its knees. Get ready, because the moment the priest asked if anyone objected, a woman stood up and uttered the 8 words that would ignite a firestorm. I'm carrying the millionaire's baby. The air in the Marble House ballroom in Newport, Rhode Island, was thick with the scent of 1,000 white peonies and old money. It was a scent Chloe Astor had grown accustomed to over the past 18 months, but one that still felt foreign, like a perfume worn by another woman. Sunlight filtered through the immense arched windows, struck the crystal chandeliers, fracturing into 1,000,000 tiny rainbows that danced across the gilded walls and the faces of the East Coast's most powerful families. Everything was perfect. Impossibly, meticulously perfect. Julian Devereux, her soon-to-be husband, had ensured it. Julian didn't do things by halves. He didn't just book a venue. He commanded a Gilded Age mansion for the weekend. He didn't just hire a florist. He flew in a botanical artist from Paris. He didn't just buy a ring. He had a legacy diamond, the Devereux star, reset by Cartier, into a modern setting that felt heavier on Chloe's finger than its 3 carats would suggest. Chloe stood in a small antechamber, the silk of her Vera Wang gown pooling around her feet like liquid moonlight. The dress was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a stark contrast to the opulence of the room next door. It was her one quiet rebellion. While Julian's mother, the formidable Eleanor Devereux, had pushed for lace and beading and a train visible from space, Chloe had chosen simplicity. She wanted to feel like herself, not a prop in the Devereux family's latest social merger. Her reflection stared back from a towering gold-leaf mirror. Her chestnut hair was swept into a low chignon. Delicate diamond drops, a gift from Julian that morning, grazing her collarbone. She looked like a bride. She looked happy. So why was there a knot of ice in the pit of her stomach? "You're trembling," a soft voice said. Chloe turned to see her best friend and maid of honor, Olivia Chen, standing in the doorway. Olivia, ever the pragmatist, held 2 glasses of champagne. "It's just nerves," Chloe lied, taking a glass and sipping the cold, bubbly liquid. "It's a big day." "Big is an understatement," Olivia murmured, her eyes sweeping over the room. "This isn't a wedding, Chloe. It's a coronation. Are you sure you're ready to be queen?" Chloe forced a smile. "I'm just marrying the man I love." "You're marrying a Devereux," Olivia corrected gently. "It's not the same thing. You're marrying the name, the legacy, the business, and her." Olivia nodded subtly towards the ballroom, where Eleanor Devereux could be seen, directing a waiter with the silent, deadly precision of a drone strike commander. Chloe's smile faltered. Eleanor was a force of nature, a woman carved from granite and Chanel tweed. She had never fully approved of Chloe, whose Astor family lineage was respectable, but lacked the world-conquering gravitas of the Devereux. To Eleanor, Chloe was a lovely but ultimately inadequate accessory for her prized son. "Julian loves me," Chloe said, her voice firmer this time, as if saying it aloud could reinforce the fact. "That's all that matters." And he did. She believed it with every fiber of her being. She remembered their first meeting at a charity gala, where he'd ignored a flock of supermodels to discuss her master's thesis on Renaissance art. He saw her not just the potential asset she could be. He was charming, attentive, and beneath the polished corporate raider exterior. She'd found a man who could be tender and vulnerable, but only with her. Those rare, private moments were the foundation of her love, the bedrock she clung to when the pressures of his world became too much. "It's time," her father said, appearing beside Olivia. He looked handsome and nervous in his tuxedo, his eyes filled with a paternal mix of pride and worry. He took her arm, his hand warm and steady over hers. As they walked towards the grand entrance of the ballroom, the string quartet swelled. The massive doors swung open, and a collective gasp rippled through the 300 guests. The aisle, lined with towering arches of white roses and hydrangeas, seemed to stretch for a mile. At the far end, beneath a canopy of shimmering organza, Julian was waiting. He was breathtaking. In his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, he looked less like a groom and more like a movie star playing a prince. His dark hair was perfectly coiffed, his jaw was firm, and when his eyes met hers, he gave her a smile that melted every last bit of her anxiety. It was his real smile, the one reserved just for her. In that moment, she wasn't marrying a Devereux. She was marrying Julian. The ice in her stomach dissolved into warmth. The ceremony was a beautiful blur. The vows they'd written themselves were heartfelt and personal, a small island of authenticity in a sea of choreographed perfection. Julian's voice was low and steady as he promised to love and honor her. Chloe's voice was clear and true as she promised the same. When he slid the diamond wedding band onto her finger, it felt right. It felt like coming home. The officiant, a kindly silver-haired man who had presided over 2 generations of Devereux weddings, smiled warmly. And now, if there is anyone present who has just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever. Hold their peace. It was a formality, a quaint, archaic line that always prompted a few chuckles from the guests. A beat of silence passed, then another. Chloe looked at Julian, a joyful, teary smile starting to form on her lips. They'd done it. And then a voice, sharp and clear as shattering glass, cut through the room. "I do." Every head swiveled. The chuckles died in people's throats. Standing in the middle of the aisle about halfway back was a woman. She was tall and striking with raven black hair, cascading over the shoulders of a crimson dress that was a declaration of war against the pastel-hued propriety of the event. Chloe had never seen her before, yet her face held a chilling familiarity, a confidence that said she belonged there. Julian froze. Chloe felt the blood drain from his face. The hand holding hers, which had been so warm and steady moments before, was suddenly slick with sweat and deathly cold. He wouldn't look at the woman. He stared straight ahead, his jaw locked so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. Eleanor Devereux shot a look at the security chief, a subtle flick of her eyes that communicated a dozen orders. But the woman was already speaking again, her voice ringing with theatrical clarity, aimed not at the officiant, but at the entire, silent, horrified audience. "I object," she said, her lips curling into a triumphant smirk as she placed a perfectly manicured hand on her stomach. "Because I'm carrying the millionaire's baby." For a long second, the only sound was the frantic percussive beat of Chloe's own heart against her ribs. The world narrowed to a pinpoint, the woman in the red dress, the frozen statue of the man beside her, and the crushing weight of 300 pairs of eyes. The air once filled with peonies, and promise was now sucked from the room, replaced by a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. Then chaos erupted. It wasn't loud at first. It was a wave of whispers that grew into a roar of murmurs. Phones previously tucked away out of respect were suddenly in every hand, their screens glowing like malevolent fireflies as they aimed to capture the socialite implosion of the decade. Portia Vance, the notorious gossip columnist for the New York Ledger, was already scribbling furiously into a small notebook, her eyes glinting with predatory delight. Chloe felt a violent tremor run through Julian's hand. He finally turned his head, not to her, but to his mother. Eleanor Devereux had risen from her front row seat. Her face was a mask of glacial fury, her expression not one of a heartbroken mother, but of a CEO whose flagship product had just catastrophically failed on live television. "Remove her," Eleanor commanded in a low, lethal tone to the head of security, a burly man named Mr. Jones. 2 guards started moving down the aisle, but the woman in red, who Chloe now knew, was named Serafina Reyes from the frantic whispers around her, held up a hand. "Don't touch me," she warned, her voice laced with steel. "I'm not trespassing. I was invited." She held up a gold-embossed invitation card. "By Julian." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Chloe's gaze snapped to Julian. His face was ashen, a mask of panicked denial. "That's a lie," he hissed, his voice hoarse. "I don't know who you are." It was the worst thing he could have said. It was such an obvious, pathetic lie that it was almost more insulting than the affair itself. The woman Serafina let out a short, bitter laugh. "You don't know me?" she asked, taking a deliberate step forward. "You didn't know me last Tuesday in your penthouse, or the week before that at the Carlisle, or all those nights you told her." She pointed a venomous finger at Chloe. "You were working late on the Tokyo merger." Each word was a physical blow. Chloe felt the air leave her lungs. The Tokyo merger, the late nights, the exhaustion he'd claimed. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her perfect life wasn't a fairy tale. It was a meticulously constructed lie, and she was the last one to know. Her knees buckled. The magnificent Vera Wang gown suddenly felt like a shroud. If her father hadn't been right behind her, his hand instantly on her elbow to steady her, she would have collapsed onto the marble floor. "Chloe," Julian began, finally turning to her, his eyes wide with a desperation she couldn't decipher. Was it regret, or just the panic of being caught? She couldn't look at him. She couldn't breathe. She felt disembodied, like she was floating above the scene, watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. The beautiful flowers, the smiling faces, the shimmering chandeliers, it all looked grotesque now, a mockery of the dream she had cherished. Olivia was by her side in an instant, her face a storm of rage and concern. "Get her out of here!" Olivia snapped at Chloe's father, her voice cutting through the noise. "Now!" As they tried to guide Chloe back down the aisle, a path clearing for them as guests scrambled to get out of the way. Serafina spoke one last time, her voice dripping with calculated pity. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, Chloe. But a child deserves to know its father. And Julian, he made me a promise." That was the final cut. A promise. It implied not just a sordid affair, but a future. A future he had planned with someone else while planning this wedding with her. The retreat down the aisle was a walk of shame, a gauntlet of horrified stares and pitying glances. Chloe kept her eyes fixed on the massive oak doors at the end of the hall, focusing on them as her single point of escape. The press, who had been contained outside, were now surging against the velvet ropes, their cameras flashing like strobe lights, turning her personal hell into a public spectacle. They hustled her through a side door and into the same antechamber where she had been so blissfully happy just minutes before. The 2 glasses of champagne still sat on the table, one half empty. The sight of them made her want to be sick. Her father wrapped her in his arms. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Olivia was already on her phone, her voice low and furious. "Get the car. To the west entrance. No, I don't care about the luggage. Just the car. Now." The door burst open, and Julian stormed in, his best man, Alexander Sterling, trailing behind him, looking pale and deeply uncomfortable. "Chloe, let me explain." Julian pleaded, his voice ragged. He reached for her, but she flinched away as if his touch would burn her. "Explain," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Explain what, Julian? Which part of this can possibly be explained? The affair. The baby. The fact that you let me walk down that aisle, stand in front of God and everyone we know and make a complete fool of myself. It's not what it looks like," he said, the classic infuriating refrain of a guilty man. "She's lying. She's crazy. She's trying to extort me. Is she pregnant?" Olivia challenged, stepping between them like a protective wolf. Julian hesitated, a fatal half-second hesitation that told them everything. I don't know. It might not even be mine." The excuse was so vile, so cowardly, that it shocked Chloe out of her stupor. A cold, hard anger began to burn through the fog of her pain. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the interruption. The handsome, charming man she loved was gone. In his place was a cornered, desperate stranger, willing to say anything to escape the consequences of his actions. "Get out," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Chloe, please," he begged. "I said get out!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, raw and broken. "Don't you dare speak to me. Don't you dare look at me. Just get it out of my sight." Alexander Sterling put a hand on Julian's shoulder. "Julian, let's go. Give her space." For once, Julian seemed to listen. He cast one last pleading look at Chloe before Alexander steered him from the room. The moment the door closed, Chloe's strength deserted her. She crumpled into Olivia's arms, the sobs she had been holding back finally breaking free in a gut-wrenching, world-ending torrent. She was vaguely aware of Olivia guiding her out a service exit, of being bundled into the back of a black town car, of the crunch of gravel as the car sped away from the mansion. She stared out the window, but she didn't see the manicured lawns or the sparkling ocean. All she could see was Seraphina's triumphant face and the look of pure terror on the man she had promised to love, honor, and cherish forever. The wedding had been perfect, and it had lasted exactly 17 minutes. The drive away from the marble house was a silent, suffocating blur. Chloe sat pressed against the cool leather of the town car, watching the opulent Newport estates streak by like monuments to a life that was no longer hers. Each grand gate and sprawling lawn was a reminder of the world she had been about to enter, a world of power, prestige, and as she now knew, gilded lies. Olivia had directed the driver to a small, discreet hotel on the waterfront, a place far removed from the high society haunts of the Devereaux. In the suite, Olivia moved with quiet efficiency, ordering tea, closing the curtains, and fielding the dozens of frantic calls already lighting up Chloe's abandoned phone. Chloe, meanwhile, remained in a state of suspended animation, still wearing her wedding dress. The beautiful gown now felt like a costume from a tragedy, its white silk a cruel mockery of the innocence she had lost. "You need to get out of that dress," Olivia said gently an hour later. Chloe looked down as if seeing it for the first time. Slowly, numbly, she allowed Olivia to help her unzip the back. The dress slid to the floor in a heap of broken dreams. Stepping out of it felt like shedding a skin. She pulled on a simple hotel bathrobe, the terry cloth a rough, grounding comfort against her skin. The silence was broken by a firm knock on the door. Olivia stiffened, ready for battle. "Who is it?" "It's Alexander Sterling," a muffled voice replied. "Please, I need to talk to Chloe. Alone." "Go to hell, Alex," Olivia shot back. "You're his best man. You probably knew all about it." "That's why I'm here," he said, his voice strained. "Please, Liv. 5 minutes, for Chloe's sake." Chloe looked at Olivia and gave a slight, tired nod. She needed answers, and she knew she wouldn't get the truth from Julian. Olivia hesitated, then reluctantly opened the door. Alexander looked terrible. His tuxedo was rumpled, his tie was loosened, and his face was etched with a mixture of guilt and exhaustion. He'd been friends with Julian since their days at boarding school, a fixture in the landscape of Chloe's relationship. She had always liked him, found him to be the most grounded of Julian's circle. "I'm so sorry, Chloe." He began, his voice low. "There's no excuse for what he did. For what I didn't do." "Did you know?" Chloe asked, her voice flat. She needed to hear it. Alexander raked a hand through his hair. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I knew he had a complication. I didn't know her name. I didn't know she was going to show up today. I swear to God, I didn't know there was a baby involved." He finally looked at her, his expression pained. "I told him to end it. Months ago. I told him he was playing with fire and that he was going to destroy the best thing that ever happened to him. A complication." Chloe repeated the word, tasting like ash in her mouth. "Is that what I was competing with? A complication named Serafina?" "It wasn't a competition," Alex insisted. "He loves you, Chloe." "I know he does. He was just weak." She was a mistake that spiraled out of control. A one-time mistake. She pressed a flicker of desperate hope she hated herself for feeling. This was the moment. This was the precipice. Alexander's gaze dropped to the floor. He took a deep breath, and when he looked up, the truth was written all over his face. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't a one-time thing. Serafina Reyes, she's been in his life for over a year, since before he even proposed to you." The floor fell away. Before he proposed. He had asked her to be his wife, slid that legacy diamond onto her finger, all while he was sleeping with another woman. The entire foundation of their relationship, every "I love you," every shared dream, every tender moment, was retroactively poisoned. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a long-form deception, a year-long performance in which she was the unwitting lead. Tears she didn't know she had left began to stream down her face again, hot and silent. Why, she whispered, "If he loved me," why Alex shook his head, looking utterly defeated. "I don't know. Power, maybe. The Devereaux ego. The idea that he could have it all. His father was the same way. Julian swore he'd never be like him. But I guess some poisons run too deep." The door to the suite flew open again this time, without the courtesy of a knock. Julian stood there, his face blotchy and his eyes red-rimmed. He had clearly been drinking. "Alex, what are you doing?" he snarled, advancing on his friend. "I told you to stay out of it." "She deserves the truth, Julian," Alex said, standing his ground. "The truth is that I love her." Julian shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of whiskey and despair. He turned his pleading eyes to Chloe. "I love you. That woman means nothing to me. She was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. We can fix this, Chloe. I can fix this. Fix this." Chloe's voice was dangerously calm. The anger was back, a glacier of rage, freezing her tears. "How do you propose to fix a baby?" "Julian, are you going to file it away with your corporate lawyers? Make it disappear with a settlement check, just like you were probably planning to do with her?" "I'll do whatever it takes," he cried, taking a step toward her. "I will give her anything she wants to go away. We can go to Paris, anywhere you want. We can forget this ever happened." The sheer arrogance of his words was staggering. The belief that his money and power could erase a human life, could erase his own treachery, could erase the public humiliation he had inflicted upon her. It was in that moment that she finally saw him for what he was. Not a flawed man who made a mistake, but a spoiled boy in a man's body who believed the world and everyone in it was his to play with. Forget she said, her laugh sharp and humorless. "I will never forget this, Julian. I will never forget standing at that altar while your mistress announced her pregnancy to the world. I will never forget the pity in everyone's eyes. And I will never ever forget that you knew. You knew all along, and you let me walk into that ambush." She walked over to the heap of silk on the floor and picked up her engagement ring, which had fallen off when she'd taken off the dress. The Devereux star winked under the hotel lights. It was cold and hard and felt like a lie in her hand. She walked up to him close enough to smell the scotch on his breath, and she looked directly into his eyes. There was no love left in her gaze, only a vast, empty expanse of disappointment. "It's over, Julian," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. She opened his hand and dropped the ring into his palm. It landed with a soft, final thud. "I want you out of my life," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You, your family, your money, your lies. I want none of it." He stared at the ring, then back at her, his face crumbling as the finality of her words sank in. "Chloe, no, please don't do this. It's already done," she said, turning her back on him. "Alex, please get him out of here before I call security." Alexander, his face a grim mask, took Julian's arm. This time Julian didn't resist. He allowed himself to be led away, a broken man, leaving behind the ruins of a life he had single-handedly demolished. When the door closed for the second time, Chloe stood tall. She wasn't crying anymore. The pain was still there, a cavernous hole in her chest, but something else was growing in its place: resolve, cold, hard, and absolute. The 2 days following the wedding that wasn't were a siege. Chloe and Olivia remained holed up in the hotel suite, the outside world, a terrifying cacophony of ringing phones and news alerts. Portia Vance's column had landed like a bomb, with the headline, "Devereux Disaster. Millionaire's Wedding Explodes with Baby Bombshell." The story was everywhere, complete with blurry photos of Chloe's stricken face and Serafina's defiant posture. They were the lead story on gossip sites, morning talk shows, and financial news networks, speculating on how the scandal might affect Devereux Industries' stock. Chloe's personal trauma had become global entertainment. Julian, to his credit, seemed to be respecting her demand for space. He hadn't called or appeared again. The only communication was a single, desperate text message: "I will fix this. I promise. I love you." Chloe had deleted it without replying. On the third morning there was a knock. Not the desperate banging of Julian or the hesitant tap of Alexander, but a sharp, authoritative rap that signaled business. Olivia opened the door to find two men in dark, impeccably tailored suits and a woman who needed no introduction, Eleanor Devereux. Eleanor swept into the room as if she owned it, her silver Chanel suit radiating an aura of untouchable power, her eyes the same piercing blue as her son's. Scanned the room with disdain lingering for a moment on the crumpled wedding dress still pooled in the corner. She didn't look at Chloe with sympathy. She looked at her like a problem to be managed. "Leave us," Eleanor commanded Olivia, not as a request, but as an order. "I'm not going anywhere," Olivia retorted, crossing her arms. "Olivia." "It's okay," Chloe said quietly. Her voice was steady. After days of hiding, a strange calm had settled over her. She knew this confrontation was inevitable. Olivia shot her a worried look, but retreated to the adjoining bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. Eleanor sat uninvited on the sofa opposite Chloe. She didn't offer condolences or apologies. She got straight to the point. "This is a regrettable situation," she began, her voice as crisp as a freshly printed stock certificate. "A deplorable public spectacle caused by a delusional, opportunistic young woman and my son's unforgivable lack of judgment." She paused, her eyes locking onto Chloe's. However, the Devereux family does not crumble in the face of scandal. We manage it, we contain it, and we move on. She gestured to one of the men who stepped forward and placed a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the coffee table between them. "My son is distraught," Eleanor continued, though her tone suggested this was more of an inconvenience than a tragedy. "He is prepared to do whatever is necessary to make amends. He still wishes to build a life with you." Chloe stared at her, incredulous. "A life after this? Does he truly believe? Do you truly believe that we can just sweep a public humiliation and a child under the rug and go on a honeymoon?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Eleanor's face. "Do not be naive, Chloe. Marriages in our world are built on much more than romantic sentiment. They are alliances. This was a strong alliance. It can be again. The child will be provided for. Handsomely. The mother will be dealt with." "Dealt with." Chloe echoed the phrase, chilling her to the bone. "She will be compensated for her silence and her discretion," Eleanor said smoothly. "There are legal instruments for these situations. And for you, of course, there would be a post-nuptial agreement of immense generosity to secure your renewed commitment." The implication was clear. She wasn't offering a solution. She was offering a transaction. A bribe to resume her role as the Devereux bride. Chloe finally understood. This wasn't about her pain. It wasn't about Julian's betrayal or the sanctity of their vows. It was about damage control. It was about protecting the Devereux brand. She was a line item in a crisis management budget. "And if I don't wish to renew my commitment?" Chloe asked, her voice dangerously soft. Eleanor's mask of civility tightened. "That would be unwise. A messy public separation would be damaging for everyone. For you most of all. You're a smart girl, Chloe. You understand how the world works. A prolonged battle with our family would be arduous. The veiled threat was unmistakable. This was the Devereux dynasty, striking back, using its immense power not to heal the wounds it had caused, but to cauterize them with threats and money. Chloe looked at the leather portfolio on the table. It represented a life of unimaginable luxury and security. All she had to do was swallow her pride, her dignity, her self-respect, and play her part. A few years ago, the thought might have been tempting, but the girl who had walked down that aisle was gone. The woman sitting here now was different. She had been forged in the fire of humiliation, and she had come out stronger. She leaned forward, but not to open the portfolio. She pushed it slowly back across the table towards Eleanor. "Your son didn't just have an affair, Eleanor," Chloe said, her voice clear and ringing with a newfound authority. "He humiliated me. He built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies. But the biggest lie he ever told was that he was different from you, that he cared about people more than profits and appearances." She stood up, a queen in a borrowed hotel bathrobe. "This meeting isn't about my future with Julian. That future is over. This is about you trying to buy my silence. And I want to be perfectly clear." She looked Eleanor straight in the eye, unflinching. "My dignity is not for sale." For the first time, Chloe saw a crack in Eleanor's composure, a flash of genuine shock, followed by a wave of cold fury. Eleanor had dealt with business rivals, hostile takeovers, and political enemies. She had never dealt with someone she couldn't buy. "You are making a grave mistake," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "No." Chloe replied, a sad, knowing smile touching her lips. "My mistake was ever believing I could marry into a family like yours and not lose myself. My mistake was believing your son was the exception when he is in fact the rule." She walked to the door and held it open. "You can see yourself out." Eleanor stood, her posture rigid. She gave Chloe one last look, a look that promised a war Chloe couldn't possibly win. Then, without another word, she swept out of the room, her two silent sentinels following in her wake. The moment the door clicked shut, Olivia rushed out from the bedroom, her eyes wide. "My God, Chloe, you were incredible." Chloe leaned against the door, her body trembling with adrenaline. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach at the thought of the power she had just defied. But for the first time in days, it was overshadowed by something else, a fierce, liberating sense of pride. They had tried to put a price on her, to reduce her to a transaction, and she had refused. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. It would be her own. While Chloe was rejecting the Devereux's gilded olive branch, Serafina Reyes was making her own calculated moves. She was not a woman to let a crisis go to waste. Having detonated the bomb at the wedding, her next phase was to seize control of the narrative before the Devereux spin machine could portray her as an unhinged gold digger. Her target was predictably Portia Vance. She granted the gossip columnist an exclusive sit-down interview, held not in a lawyer's office, but in a tastefully decorated Soho loft designed to scream artistic soul, not scheming mistress. The resulting article was a masterpiece of curated victimhood. In it, Serafina painted a tragic picture of a whirlwind romance with a powerful man who was trapped in a life he didn't want. "Julian never loved her," Serafina claimed, dabbing a tear from her eye with a silk handkerchief. "Chloe was a business arrangement, a suitable match his mother approved of. He told me I was his escape, his one true passion. He promised me we'd be together. He picked out this loft for me. He said once the wedding spectacle was over, and the family was satisfied he would find a way to quietly end it, and we could build a real life together. She spoke of their shared dreams, of Julian's promises to be a father to their child. She produced text messages, carefully selected of course, that seemed to corroborate her story. Can't wait to get away from all this and be with you. You're the only thing that feels real. They were stripped of context, but to the public they were damning. The most brilliant part of her gambit was her portrayal of the wedding crash. It wasn't an act of revenge, she insisted, but of desperation. I found out I was pregnant, and he started to pull away. She told Portia, her voice trembling. The calls became less frequent. He was suddenly too busy. I realized with horror that his family's plan was working. They were going to absorb him, and he was going to abandon me and our child. Standing up at that wedding was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, but what choice did I have? It wasn't for me. It was to force him to acknowledge his own baby. The public, always hungry for a story of love against the odds, began to eat it up. The narrative shifted. Chloe was no longer just the tragic victim. She was now cast as the cold, society-approved choice, the other woman in Julian and Serafina's epic love story. In her hotel room, Chloe read the article with a growing sense of nausea. It was all lies, of course, a twisted version of the truth designed to make Serafina a sympathetic figure. But it was effective. "She's brilliant," Olivia muttered, reading over Chloe's shoulder, "and utterly terrifying." But something in the article snagged Chloe's attention. It was a small detail, a quote from Serafina about her first doctor's appointment. "I went to see Dr. Alistair Finch at the Park Avenue Women's Clinic. He confirmed I was 8 weeks along. That was the day I knew I had to fight for my baby." The name stuck in Chloe's mind. Dr. Alistair Finch. It sounded familiar. She pulled out her laptop and did a quick search. The results were immediate. Dr. Finch was a prominent OB-GYN. But he had been in the news a year ago for a different reason. He was at the center of a messy, high-profile divorce. His estranged wife had accused him of having an affair. Chloe's heart began to beat faster. She clicked on an old Page 6 article about the divorce. And there it was. A grainy photo of Dr. Finch leaving a restaurant with a woman his alleged mistress. The woman's face was partially obscured, but there was no mistaking the sharp jawline and cascade of raven black hair. It was Serafina Reyes. "Oh my God," Chloe breathed. "Olivia, look at this." Olivia stared at the screen, her eyes widening. No way. She was having an affair with her own doctor. It was more than that. The timeline was critical. The article was from 10 months ago. Serafina's affair with Dr. Finch was happening around the same time her affair with Julian was starting. The pieces began to click into place with terrifying speed. Serafina wasn't just a mistress. She was a chess player managing multiple, powerful men at once. The pregnancy. What if it wasn't as straightforward as she claimed? Chloe's mind raced. Julian had said it might not even be mine. At the time, she had dismissed it as a cowardly, self-serving excuse. But what if it was true? What if Serafina herself wasn't sure? Or worse, what if she knew it wasn't Julian's, but was using him because he was the bigger prize? Julian Devereux was worth billions. A respected but mortal doctor was not. This was Serafina's gambit. It wasn't just about love or passion. It was a calculated high-stakes play for the ultimate payoff. She had trapped Julian using the most undeniable leverage a woman can have. "She's playing him," Chloe said, a sense of cold dread mixing with a strange surge of clarity. "She's playing all of them." The discovery changed everything. This was no longer just a story of heartbreak and betrayal. It was a story of a sophisticated, ruthless con artist. And Chloe the Devereux's and a respected doctor were all just pawns in her game. The knowledge was a weapon. But how to use it? Exposing Serafina would mean diving even deeper into the mud, engaging in the same kind of public warfare she despised. It would mean airing even more dirty laundry. But the alternative was to let Serafina win. To let her destroy Julian's life, which a part of Chloe admitted he deserved, tarnish her own reputation, and walk away with a Devereux-sized fortune based on a monumental lie. A new resolve hardened within her. Her fight with the Devereux had been about her own dignity. This was about something more. This was about the truth. "I need to see Alexander," Chloe said, her voice firm. "I think I know how to end this, but I'm going to need his help." She was no longer just the victim. She was now a player in the game, and she was about to make her first move. Chloe met Alexander Sterling at a quiet, unassuming coffee shop in Tribeca, far from the prying eyes of the Upper East Side. He looked relieved and surprised to see her a silent acknowledgement of the war she had declared on his best friend's family. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid out her discovery on the table between them, the old article about Dr. Finch's divorce, the photo of him with Serafina, the damning timeline. She was seeing them both. Chloe explained, her voice low and intense. Julian and this doctor at the same time, right around the time she would have conceived. Alexander stared at the evidence, his face paling. So the baby could be anyone's, Chloe finished for him. Julian was right. He might not be the father, but he's the one with the billion-dollar trust fund, so he's the one she targeted. The revelation hung in the air between them. It was a bombshell that could change everything, but it was also just a theory, a suspicion based on a grainy photo and a timeline. They had no proof. "What do you want to do?" Alexander asked, his eyes searching her face. "We could leak this to Portia Vance, let her run with it, cast doubt on the whole story." Chloe shook her head. "No. That's their game. A public he said, she said, that just gets messier and more painful for everyone. I'm done being a character in the media's soap opera. I want to end this, Alex. Quietly, but definitively. For my own sanity." "How I need you to get me a meeting with Julian," she said. "And with his mother. Both of them. Together." Alexander looked stunned. Chloe, after what Eleanor tried to pull. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said, her resolve firm. "This isn't about reconciliation. This is about closure. They need to understand the whole truth of who and what they're dealing with. And I need something from them." 2 days later, Chloe walked into the Devereux Industries headquarters on Park Avenue. It was the heart of the empire, a skyscraper of steel and glass that radiated power. She was escorted to the top-floor conference room, a space with panoramic views of Central Park designed to make visitors feel small. Julian and Eleanor were already there, seated at the head of a massive mahogany table. Julian looked haggard and broken. Eleanor looked like she was carved from ice, her expression unreadable. 2 lawyers flanked them like stone gargoyles. Chloe walked in alone. She had refused legal counsel. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. "Thank you for seeing me." Chloe began, her voice calm and even, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. "What is this about, Chloe?" Eleanor asked, her tone clipped. "If you've reconsidered our offer." I haven't, Chloe interrupted smoothly. She walked to the head of the table and placed a single file folder down. This is about her, Serafina Reyes. She proceeded to lay out the entire story, just as she had for Alexander. The affair with the doctor, the overlapping timelines, the calculated brilliant con. She watched their faces as she spoke. Julian's expression shifted from misery to confusion, then to a dawning, horrified understanding. Eleanor's mask remained perfectly in place, but Chloe saw a flicker in her eyes, the sharp, analytical gleam of a predator recognizing a rival. When she was finished, the room was silent. It's a theory, one of the lawyers finally said, his voice dismissive, circumstantial, inadmissible. Maybe Chloe conceded. But it's enough to demand a paternity test, isn't it? And if you demand one, this all becomes public. The affair with the doctor, her entire scheme. It will be a media firestorm, far worse than the one you're already in. Your brand, your stock, will be dragged through a scandal of epic proportions. The Devereux name will be associated with this con artist forever. She let that sink in. She had them. She was offering them not a way to get her back, but a way to save themselves. "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. This was the language she understood. First, Chloe said, you are going to handle Serafina, not by buying her silence, but by exposing her. Your lawyers will contact her lawyers. You will present them with this information and demand a paternity test. You will make it clear that if she refuses, or if the test proves Julian is not the father, you will not only cut her off, you will sue her for fraud and defamation. You will ruin her. She'll take a quiet settlement and disappear. She looked at Julian. Second, I want a public apology from you. Not some corporate-approved statement, but a real one. In it, you will take full responsibility for your actions, for the pain you caused me, and you will state for the record that I had no knowledge of any of it. You will clear my name of any insinuation that I was complicit in this mess. Julian nodded, his eyes filled with a fresh wave of shame. Done. And third, Chloe said, turning her attention back to Eleanor. This was the most important part. She slid a single piece of paper out of the folder. It was a check, made out to Chloe Astor from her own bank account for the full appraised value of the Cartier engagement ring. This is for the ring, Chloe said. It was a gift, and I'm returning it. But this is different. She pushed the check towards Eleanor. I want you to match this amount. Not from the company, not from a trust. From your personal account. A donation to the New York Women's Foundation, a charity that helps women who have been victims of abuse, poverty, and injustice. Women with real problems, not the manufactured drama of the 1%. She stood up, her part in this finished. You wanted to buy my silence, Eleanor. But I told you my dignity isn't for sale, and you will not use your money to erase what your family did. You will use it to do some actual good in the world. Maybe it will be the first honest transaction you've made in years. She looked from Eleanor's stunned face to Julian's broken one. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a vast, hollow emptiness and the quiet relief of an ending. I loved you, Julian, she said softly, her voice finally holding a tremor of the pain she had buried so deep. And you broke my heart. I will recover. I hope for your sake you learn something from this. Goodbye. Without looking back, Chloe Astor walked out of the conference room, out of the building, and out of the world of the Devereux. She stepped onto Park Avenue, and for the first time in a long time, the city air felt clean. She didn't know where she was going next, but she was walking on her own 2 feet, under her own power. She was free. The wedding had been a disaster, the aftermath a war. But in the end, it wasn't the millionaire's baby or the mistress's scheme that defined her. It was her own choice to walk away, not as a victim, but as the woman who had finally saved herself. And that's how Chloe Astor took back her life. It's a story that proves that real power isn't about money or famous names. It's about dignity, integrity, and the courage to walk away from a life that is trying to break you. While the Devereaux were left to clean up the mess of their own making, Chloe chose a different path, one of freedom and self-respect. What do you think of her final choice? Was it the ultimate power move? Let us know in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of drama betrayal and ultimate empowerment, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story they won't forget, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-life dramas that are even wilder than fiction. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.